911, do you have an emergency?
I have a 16-year-old daughter who apparently snuck out of her room last night. She has not been home, hasn't went to work, can't get a hold of her from any of her friends, and scared to death.
4.
No.
They didn't want to be friends with her anymore, which is sick. You know, if you don't want to be friends with somebody, leave them alone, but don't murder them.
What do you want to say to these two girls?
Rotten hell. How's that? Because that's exactly what I want them to do. I want them to go through the pain and agony my daughters went through.
All right, folks, buckle up. Today, we're diving into a seriously chilling case from a quiet little town called Star City, West Virginia. This isn't one of those stories where we crack jokes or make light of things. This one's heavy. We're talking about the Skylar Neese case. And trust me, this is one of those times you realize that sometimes your so-called friends can be the real danger. Skylar Neese was born on February 10, 1996. She was the only child of her parents, Mary and Dave Neese. Everyone who knew her described Skylar as smart, kind, stubborn, and full of life. She went to elementary school in Cheat Lake, West Virginia. That's where, in second grade, Skylar met Sheila Eddy. Sheila, who was about 5 months older, was also an only child. The two hit it off instantly. You know how kids are at that age. When high school rolled around in 2010, they went together. And that's where they met the third girl in this story, Rachel Schoaf. Rachel was into acting and singing, the kind of person who wanted to be in the spotlight. And yeah, she was also an only child. The three of them started hanging out all the time, and like most teens, they got into a bit of harmless trouble. Nothing major, just the usual teenage stuff, sneaking out, skipping classes, breaking curfew, maybe trying things they shouldn't. You get the idea. But here's where the red flags start showing up, guys. Skylar's parents and even her friends started to notice that Sheila seemed to have a pretty negative influence on the group. Some of Skylar's other friends would actually avoid her when Sheila was around, calling Sheila bossy and mean. The same thing happened with Rachel's friends, who said Rachel's personality started changing after she began spending time with Sheila. Despite that, Skylar refused to walk away. She truly thought Sheila was her best friend, someone she could count on, someone she looked up to. Now, Rachel's reasons for staying close to Sheila were a bit less obvious. Rachel came from a pretty well-off family, she was popular, and she didn't need Sheila to boost her status. But honestly, this all sounds like one of those classic high school dramas, doesn't it? I'd guess Rachel liked the thrill of doing things with Sheila that she couldn't do around her stricter, more religious friends. Sheila made breaking the rules look exciting. And here's something interesting, my friends. While Sheila was often described as the bad influence, things didn't really start spiraling until Rachel joined the picture. For a while, the trio got along fine, but by their sophomore year, things began to shift. Late in the summer of 2011, during a sleepover, something went wrong. Skylar ended up seeing Sheila and Rachel acting out after drinking too much, and it caused a fight. That night marked the beginning of a serious rift between them. As Sheila and Rachel grew closer, Skylar started to feel like the outsider. Sometimes Sheila and Rachel would even dress alike, leaving Skylar on the sidelines. Both Sheila and Rachel were into dating and parties, while Skylar still came off as the more innocent one, kind of like the third wheel. But here's where it gets complicated. Skylar knew things about Sheila and Rachel that nobody else did. She knew their secrets. And you can probably guess how that ended up causing major problems later on. Skylar even hinted about it on Twitter. One time she tweeted something like, "I could tell the whole school all the stuff I know about everyone, and it's a lot. Number if I could get away with it." Social media will play a big role in this story, so keep that in mind. The drama between Skylar and Sheila, especially online, started getting worse and worse. And guys, this was just the calm before the storm. So here's where things start getting real, guys. The tension between the girls was building, and people around them could feel it. Skylar's parents noticed it first, but even classmates started whispering that Sheila wasn't exactly the kind of friend you'd want your kid hanging out with. You know, that type, charming when she wants to be, but controlling underneath. Some of Skylar's friends straight up said they stayed away when Sheila was around because she made Skylar act different, colder, meaner, more distant. Same deal with Rachel's crowd. Her close friends, especially from church, said she wasn't the same person anymore. But Skylar? She stayed loyal. She defended Sheila no matter what. In her eyes, Sheila was still her bestie, the one who'd always have her back. Now, Rachel's situation was a bit different. She came from money, her family was well respected, and she didn't really need Sheila. But if you've ever been a teenager, you know how that works. Maybe she liked the adrenaline. Maybe she liked doing stuff she couldn't do at home. Being with Sheila gave her that freedom, that taste of rebellion. And honestly, here's the twist: while everyone painted Sheila as the bad one, the real chaos began when Rachel joined in. For a while, everything looked fine on the outside. They went to parties, hung out after school, posted selfies like everything was perfect. But behind all that, the cracks were getting deeper. By the summer of 2011, things took a turn. One night, during a sleepover, Skylar saw something between Sheila and Rachel that made her uncomfortable. Whatever it was, it caused a massive argument. That night was the beginning of the end for their trio. From then on, it was 2 against 1, Sheila and Rachel growing tighter, and Skylar being slowly pushed out. They'd start dressing alike, finishing each other's sentences, and laughing at inside jokes Skylar wasn't part of anymore. And that hurt. You could see it in her tweets, short posts that screamed sadness and frustration without saying much at all. She started posting more cryptic things, like little warning shots. And here's where it starts to feel eerie, y'all. Skylar knew too much. She'd been around for all their late-night talks, seen things they probably didn't want getting out. She had receipts, not literally, but she had dirt, and she wasn't shy about hinting at it online. One of her tweets said something like, "If I told everyone what I know, it'd blow this town up." You can almost feel the tension through the screen, right? Twitter basically became the battleground. Fights broke out there more often than in real life, and it wasn't your typical teen drama anymore. It was mean, cutting, and public. Every subtweet, every emoji had a meaning. It's like they were performing their friendship's downfall for everyone to see. By the start of summer in 2012, things hit a breaking point. Skylar and Sheila went on a week-long trip to Myrtle Beach, and let's just say, it didn't go well. They argued constantly. When they came back home, Sheila told Rachel something chilling, that she was done with Skylar. Now, before you get too deep into guessing what happened next, let's pause here, because what's coming isn't easy to process. If you've ever had drama with friends, imagine it going so far that someone starts thinking, we'd be better off without her. Yeah, that's the level we're talking about. What's wild is that even before that trip, people at school had overheard the girls talking about ways to get rid of someone. Now, in most teen circles, that would just be edgy talk, dark humor, or gossip after a crime show. But one girl said she overheard Sheila and Rachel mention Skylar's name. When she told Skylar about it, Skylar just laughed it off. She said something like, "They're just joking. They're always dramatic." But in hindsight, that was the moment things crossed a line. Now, to be clear, we're not diving into violent details here, we're keeping it respectful. But I'll say this. The situation started spiraling fast. There were more cryptic tweets, more tension, more lies. By the time July rolled around, Skylar didn't realize she was just days away from something irreversible. And guys, before we move on, think about this. These were 16-year-old kids, just high schoolers. The kind of age where most people worry about grades and curfew, not life or death choices. That's what makes this case so disturbing. Alright, folks, this is where things take a dark turn. By early July of 2012, Skylar had no idea she was about to walk into the most tragic night of her life. On the evening of July 5th, Skylar came home from her shift at Wendy's around 10 p.m. She said goodnight to her parents, kissed them both, and went to her room. It seemed like a completely normal night, nothing out of the ordinary. But not long after midnight, her friends Sheila and Rachel called or texted her, asking if she wanted to go for a late-night drive. And if you've been following teen cases for a while, you probably already know those quick drives are almost never as simple as they sound. Sheila parked her silver car near Skylar's apartment. Skylar quietly slid her window open, placed a small bench underneath, and climbed out like she'd done before. She jumped into the car with her two friends, not knowing this would be the last time her parents saw her alive. The next morning, Dave and Mary Neese thought Skylar was still asleep in her bed. Her dad came home around noon to let her borrow his car for work, but her bedroom door was locked from the inside. When he looked closer, he noticed the window was open and the bench was still under it. That's when his heart dropped. He knew something was wrong. Dave called Sheila right away to ask if she'd heard from Skylar. Sheila said she'd talked to her around midnight but hadn't seen her. A few hours later, when Skylar didn't show up for her shift at Wendy's, her manager called home to ask where she was. That was completely out of character. Skylar never missed work. Her parents started to panic. They called the police to report her missing.
911, do you have an emergency?
I have a 16-year-old daughter who apparently snuck out of her room last night. She has not been home, hasn't went to work, and get a hold of her from any of her friends and scared to death.
4.
No.
Not long after, Sheila and her mom showed up at the Neese home, offering to help search. They went door to door, asking neighbors if anyone had seen Skylar that night. They even checked with the landlord, who had security cameras installed. And here's the crazy part: when they looked at the footage, they saw Skylar getting into a car just after midnight, but nobody recognized the vehicle as Sheila's, even though it was hers. Somehow, everyone missed that detail. The car was described as an SUV, even though Sheila drove a sedan. That one mistake would delay the case for months. When police first saw the footage, they didn't think it looked like an abduction. Since Skylar got into the car willingly, they labeled her as a possible runaway. One of the officers reportedly told her parents something like, "She probably ran off with a friend. She'll be back in a few days." And guys, let's be honest, that's one of the worst things you can say to a worried parent. Days turned into weeks, and there was still no sign of Skylar. Meanwhile, Sheila was out there acting like the concerned best friend, posting about Skylar online, putting up missing posters, and crying in front of reporters. If you didn't know better, you'd think she was the one who'd lost someone she loved. She even told people that she and Rachel were working with the police and doing everything they could to find her. But behind the scenes, things weren't adding up. An FBI agent joined the case after another missing person report came in from the same area, thinking the two cases might be connected. Detectives interviewed Sheila on July 9th, just 3 days after Skylar disappeared. Sheila repeated the same story she'd told before, that she picked Skylar up around 11. They hung out for about an hour, and she dropped her off before midnight. Detectives noticed how calm she was. She didn't seem worried, she seemed interested in the investigation, almost eager to know what police had found. And that, friends, is always a red flag. The next day, they called Rachel in. She claimed she hadn't seen Skylar at all, that she'd been at a church camp that week. Her mother and a family friend did notice a small cut on her ankle, but they didn't think much of it. Rachel promised to meet with police after returning from camp, but when the time came, she backed out. Eventually, detectives got both girls in for questioning again. This time, they compared their stories, and something about how perfectly the timelines matched made the investigators suspicious. It was too neat, too rehearsed. Still, with Skylar last seen getting into a car voluntarily, police couldn't issue an Amber Alert. The rules were strict. Alerts were only for confirmed abductions. To Skylar's family, that didn't make sense. She had left behind her phone charger, her contact lenses, and the small bench under her window, all signs she planned to come back. Her mom, Mary, refused to give up. She went to social media, posting updates and pushing the case into the public eye. She started to suspect something was off about Sheila and Rachel. And honestly, who could blame her? By late summer, the case had hit a wall. Skylar was still missing, the leads were going nowhere, and the two girls who were last seen with her were walking around acting like nothing happened. And guys, if you've been around true crime long enough, you already know when someone inserts themselves into a case too much. It's never a good sign. Alright guys, let's dig into the next part. This is where the investigation finally starts picking up speed, and the walls begin closing in. After weeks of frustration, Skylar's parents were done waiting. They reached out to the West Virginia State Police, asking for help. The local department had hit a dead end, and honestly, it felt like no one was treating it with the urgency it deserved. State investigators jumped in, and the first thing they did was recheck everything, especially the security footage. And guess what? They caught something everyone else had missed. The car Skylar got into that night wasn't some random vehicle. It was Sheila's. That single realization changed the entire direction of the case. Now, the police weren't saying anything publicly, but behind the scenes, they were getting warrants to pull the girl's phone records and messages. They also subpoenaed cell tower data, trying to figure out exactly where each girl's phone was during the early morning hours of July 6th. At the same time, detectives started digging deeper into Sheila's behavior. She was calling the Neese family every day, showing up to help with searches, crying on cue, but the officers noticed something off. Whenever they shared updates, Sheila would ask weirdly specific questions, like, "Did you check the area by the river?" Or "Did you find anything near the bridge?" It wasn't just concern, it felt calculated. And folks, if you've ever watched enough true crime cases, you know what that usually means. Guilt mixed with fear of being caught. Meanwhile, Rachel was starting to crack. While Sheila kept up her perfect performance, Rachel began distancing herself, skipping school, avoiding interviews, shutting down emotionally. Her parents noticed her anxiety was getting worse by the day. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and didn't want to talk about Skylar at all. Then, when detectives finally got Rachel back in the room for another interview, they pressed her with the new info. The phone records didn't match her story, and the car timeline didn't add up. That's when she broke a little. She said something like, "Okay, we did go for a drive, but Skylar ran into the woods, and we couldn't find her after that." Now, obviously, that story didn't make much sense, but it was the first real shift in her version, and investigators knew that once a story changes, the truth usually isn't far behind. Not long after that, Sheila adjusted her own story too. She suddenly remembered that Skylar ran off after an argument and that they tried to look for her. Convenient, right? It was clear the girls were trying to sync up their lies. Around mid-December, Mary Neese Skylar's mom posted a long message on Facebook. She thanked the community for helping search, but she also called out Sheila and Rachel directly, saying she believed they were hiding something. The post blew up, getting shared hundreds of times, and people in town started to turn on the two girls. By that point, the pressure was getting unbearable for Rachel. She had a major fight with her parents, locked herself in her room, and refused to come out. Her mental state got so bad that her family took her to get professional help. And here's the moment that changes everything. January 3rd, 2013. Rachel sits down with detectives again, and this time, she doesn't hold back. Within minutes, she says the words that investigators had feared and suspected all along. "We heard her." Those three words flipped the whole case on its head. Rachel told police that she and Sheila had picked Skylar up after midnight, driven her out to a rural area, and that something terrible happened there. She didn't go into all the details right away, and out of respect, we're not going to either, but she made it clear. Skylar never came back. When asked why, Rachel gave an answer that chilled everyone in the room. "We just didn't like her anymore." Now, take a second to let that sink in. No jealousy, no money, no revenge, just a cold, meaningless reason. That's what makes this case so haunting. Rachel agreed to take the police to the location where everything happened. The area was remote, wooded, and covered in snow. She pointed out a general spot but couldn't identify the exact place because the snow was too thick. Detectives decided they'd have to wait until the weather cleared to search properly. In the meantime, they knew they had to get more evidence, and fast. They set up electronic surveillance and asked Rachel to contact Sheila to see if she'd slip up. Sheila didn't. She stayed calm, confident, and still played the role of the grieving best friend. But her luck was running out. By mid-January of 2013, investigators returned to the remote area Rachel had pointed out. The snow was beginning to melt, and this time they brought search dogs and forensic experts. As they walked through the brush, one of the handlers spotted something beneath a pile of branches, a discovery that confirmed everyone's worst fears. After 6 long months, Skylar had finally been found. It was heartbreaking, but for her parents, at least there was no more uncertainty. They could finally stop wondering and start searching for justice. While the investigation moved forward, Rachel was cooperating with authorities. She stayed out of custody under strict supervision, while detectives built their case not only against her, but especially against Sheila. The police believed Sheila would never admit anything voluntarily, and they were right. She stopped posting as often online, avoided the Nice family, and kept her distance from most people. On that same day, Sheila went on Twitter and posted something vague and cold, like nothing had happened. Even now, people still talk about how unsettling that was. Weeks later, on May 1st, Rachel turned herself in. She stood in court for the first time and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. She agreed to testify against Sheila if the case went to trial. In exchange, the state recommended a 20-year sentence. Sheila, on the other hand, was still pretending she had nothing to do with it. But the evidence was stacking up: phone records, Rachel's confession, witness statements, even items recovered near the scene. Finally, in December, police arrested Sheila while she was out having lunch with her mom at a Cracker Barrel restaurant. On January 24, 2014, Sheila appeared in court for her preliminary hearing, and for the first time, the confident, outspoken girl everyone knew was gone. She cried almost the entire time, clinging to her attorney for support. Then, in a move that shocked everyone, she changed her plea to guilty, this time to first-degree murder. The prosecution agreed to recommend life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. During sentencing, the courtroom was silent. Skylar's father, Dave Nice, stood up to speak. His words were calm but powerful. He said something along the lines of, "The person sitting here today, the one who called herself my daughter's friend, took her from us without remorse. You will never understand the fear and pain she felt in those final moments." The judge then turned to Sheila and read her sentence: life in prison with mercy, which meant she would be eligible for parole after serving 15 years. It was a technical phrase, but for the Nice family, it didn't make the loss any easier. A few weeks later, Rachel faced her own sentencing. She received 30 years for second-degree murder, with the possibility of parole after 10. Both girls were sent to the Lakin Correctional Center, where they remain today. After the trial, Dave and Mary Nice filed a civil lawsuit against both girls and their parents, arguing that their lack of supervision contributed to what happened. Eventually, the case was settled out of court. The Nices were awarded $5 million in damages, though. Realistically, that money will likely never be paid. And here's the thing. Guys, even after all that, nobody could give a real reason. No jealousy, no money, no secret plan. When asked why, the only answer was, "We just didn't like her anymore." That's what makes this story so haunting. It's not a mystery of how or when, it's a mystery of why. How can someone turn on a friend like that? How can something so senseless happen among kids who were just supposed to be figuring out life? If you take anything away from this case, let it be this: pay attention to the people around you. Sometimes the ones smiling next to you in photos aren't really your friends. The story of Skylar Nice is tragic, senseless, and unforgettable, but her parents made sure her name would never fade. They fought for new laws in West Virginia that require police to act faster in missing person cases, no matter the circumstances. So if you ever see someone post something worrying online or act out of character, don't ignore it. Speak up. You never know when it could save a life. Thank you for staying with me through this one, guys. This case was a tough one to cover, but it's an important reminder of how fragile trust can be. If you want to see more real stories like this, no fluff, no sugarcoating, make sure to hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time on the channel. Stay safe out there.